his needs, what God thinks of you. Okay. So we're picking up off of last week. Last week we discussed the idea that belief in God actually is not really very problematic at all. And that's the reason why most people will actually tell you they believe in a primal force, a supreme being, an original source, whatever it is that we would like to call it, or in plain old English, God. When we talk about what the essential being of God is, which is simply an infinite entity, an infinite being, that's easy for us to relate to accept. The challenge comes when we deal with the packaging that comes along with that, all of the other things that come along with God. And we're going to start with one major one tonight, and that is the fact that God seems to want an awful lot of things, and he couldn't find anyone else to get them from than me. Why does God need so many things from me? Why does he issue so many instructions for mankind? Why is it such a burden? This is a package that comes along with this infinite being, and we call, in Hebrew, we call this mitzvah, right? Or mitzvos, right? Commandments. Why does God give us so many commandments? And many of them are really intrusive. And many of them are really, really disturb my schedule and my day and the things I want to do. And then there are things I'm not supposed to do. This is a serious package. How many of you would agree that this is challenging? Okay, we all agree, right? I'm the first one to say this. I want to be clear, okay, that it makes no difference whether someone looks at what we would call religious or not. There is no question that there are things that God asks of all of us which gets in the way of every single person you know. It makes no difference who the person is. No one's going to tell you that it's thrilling to wake up every morning and spend 45 minutes in prayer. Now, some days it may be, but some days it may not be, right? There are many other things there's a long list of things which are not necessarily pleasant depending on who we are, what we like, our disposition, our place in life, etc. So this really gets in the way. Today I think there's this concept of a no strings attached relationships, which of course is not a relationship. But that being said, the relationship with God is with many, in fact, 613 strings attached. And actually, it's funny, and counting. No, 613, we're stopping there. God sealed it, thank God, right? And actually, I wear these strings. We call them tzitzis, right? And sometimes people who have no idea what they are ask me, what are those strings hanging outside of your pants? Right? And they actually are to remind us of the 613 commandments. So what we want to do is this. We're going to break down the two primary issues that we have with the commandments, okay? And the two primary issues that we have with the commandments are, one of them is intellectual, and one of them is emotional. And we're going to see how the two are very intertwined. And that's going to help us resolve our perspective of the commandments that God has given us. You may have heard this, that everything in life, we build a story around. We build a story around everything in life. And the story we build around something is the feeling and the meaning and the significance that thing carries for us. And that's sort of what we're going to go through here in understanding the intellectual challenge and understanding the emotional challenge. Okay, so the intellectual challenge is this. Last week we discussed how God is this infinite being. In fact, we discussed that God's so awesome and so infinite that while many people believe that God is high up there, so therefore he cannot relate to us down here, we discussed that Judaism teaches us that God's even greater than that. God is so great that he doesn't live within a spectrum or within a framework the way we think that there's a higher and a lower. God's outside of that framework. And therefore, higher and lower is all the same to him. Right? So that's how awesome God is. If God is that infinite and that awesome, then the question is, do I have any significance in his eyes? Right? Our bodies are filled with bacteria. Okay? Trillions of cells of bacteria. Trillions of cells. You know how many trillions? About 39 trillion. I have no idea what that number even means. It's that much. I'm trying to wrap myself around 1.6 billion megamillions, right? So, now one bacterium cell from those 39 trillion, right? Of what significance does that have to the body? That's so insignificant, right? And that's just one person. That's just one human body. Now imagine one person amongst the entire universe and all of the galaxies. Of what significance do I have in the eyes of God? And King David actually expresses this. Here, let's read text number 1 where we see how King David expresses this.
When I observe your heavens, the work of your fingers, and the moon and stars that set you in place, I wonder, what is man that you should be mindful of him? What is a human that you should recall him?
Okay, so what's King David saying? What am I? What is a human being? Completely insignificant in the eyes of God. Now, I'm not having a self-esteem crisis from this. I'm having a self-esteem crisis, which is why I need all the emails. But I'm not having a self-esteem crisis because of this. I used to have a mirror on my dresser at home, and on the mirror there was a little caption. It said, "A face only a mother could love." But here's the thing. A mother, there's always a mother to go back to, and she'll take you in and she loves you, right? So God, you don't like me. I'm insignificant to you. No problem. I go back home to my mother. I'm very significant, right? No one is more important than me in the universe, unless my other brothers are around. But if we're not significant to God, then surely our actions are not significant, right? And this is a major intellectual problem. This is a huge problem. If God is so great, my actions are meaningless before him. So what? God is commanding me to do things, and I should do all of these things, and does it really matter? Does it really mean anything? Let's read text number 2 from the book of Job.
If you sin, how do you affect him? If your transgressions are many, what do you do to him? If you are righteous, what do you give to him? What does he take from your hand? Your wickedness only affects a human like yourself, and your righteousness only affects people.
What's he saying? Our actions are meaningless to God. Is there really anything I can do that God will say, wow, I needed you to do that, thank you? This is the intellectual problem. Let's talk about the emotional problem, okay? And I want to start with a simple question to everyone. How many of you drank a cup of coffee this morning when you woke up? Raise your hand. Okay. Most of the room. I woke up this morning and I drank a cup of coffee. Why do you think I drank a cup of coffee?
To wake up.
Thank you, Billy. To wake up. I still wasn't up. Habit. Anything else? Why that habit? Why didn't I drink a glass of green juice? You know that green juice that tastes so wonderful, takes you to ecstasy? Why didn't I drink that? Why did I drink the coffee? Because I like it. Why do you drink the coffee? How many here drank coffee because you don't like it? Okay, no one. So we have a unanimous understanding that all of us who drank coffee this morning drank because who here got up while it was still dark outside, about 40 degrees? Wait. I'm not going to make it that easy for you, Got up when it was, dark and 40 degrees, and you went out for a jog. Wow. Always counting your Rochelle. Okay, yeah, so we have about 3-4 people, right? What happened to all of our coffee drinkers? Where'd you drop off? Right? Well, why didn't all of us who didn't go for a jog this morning? Why didn't you go outside and go for a jog? Because it was, for the most part, because although you were told 1,000 times that it's very good for you, but who's going outside in the cold for a run? What are you, crazy? I'm relaxing in my home with a hot coffee, right? Okay. The bottom line is that what drives, and this is with all due respect to myself and to all of us, okay? We're very sophisticated, brilliant human beings. What drives most of what we do is how it makes us feel. When things make us feel good, we are driven towards it. When things make us feel bad, we stay away from it. That is the tendency of everyone, just about everyone that we know. So we ask ourselves a simple question: does this feel good or not? Is this convenient and easier, or is it inconvenient and harder? And that's going to affect the decisions that we make, right? Would you just say, like, off the cuff, would you think that someone who comes and gives you a whole bunch of orders and instructions, commandments, is that going to be convenient or inconvenient? If you think it's going to be convenient to get orders from someone, raise your hand. Inconvenient. All right, I don't feel lonely here, right? It's obvious, right? You have a spouse that's always telling you what to do. It puts a strain on the relationship. We'll put it at that, right? It puts a strain on the relationship. And in fact, so this is a major emotional problem. So we have an intellectual problem. What I'm doing intellectually, I just can't get this. What can I do that will be significant to God? And emotionally, can you just stop making my life harder? It's hard enough. Do I really need to do this now and that later? And is it really a problem if I do this thing that you're telling me not to do? That's the emotional problem. And in fact, when God came to give the Torah, God went to a bunch of nations and asked them if they would like the Torah. What would you have said if God came to you with the long list? Right? What would you have said? All of these different things, an endless number of things. So let's read actually text number 3, which is really interesting.
Before God revealed himself to the Jews and gave them the Torah, he revealed himself and offered the Torah to all other nations. First, he approached the children of Esau and offered them the Torah. What is written in it, they asked. God responded, do not murder. Master of the world, they retorted, our father Esau was a murderer. As it is stated, the hands are the hands of Esau. In fact, his father Isaac assured him, you will live by your sword. Next, God approached the children of Ammon and Moab and offered them the Torah. What is written in it, they asked. God responded, do not commit adultery. Master of the world, they retorted, our very existence is due to an illicit relationship. As it is stated, the 2 daughters of Lot became pregnant from their father, and they gave birth to Ammon and Moab. God continued and encountered the children of Ishmael and offered them the Torah. What is written in it, they asked. God responded, do not steal. Master of the world, they retorted, our father Ishmael was a bandit. As it is stated, he will be a wild man, he will fight everyone, and everyone will fight him. In a similar fashion, God approached every nation and offered the Torah, and every nation found reason to refuse it.
Okay. Why did they all turn down the Torah? Because it was inconvenient with what they wanted. Very simple. It wasn't something they were looking for. It wasn't making their lives easier. It was making their lives harder. So God goes to Esau, do not kill, we don't want it. Ammon and Moab, do not commit adultery, we don't want it. Ishmael, do not steal, and we don't want it, right? What happens? Inconvenient, inconvenient, inconvenient. That's the simple reason why. And it's reasonable. I get it. I turn a lot of things down because they're inconvenient. Now, what happened when God came to the Jews? The Jews say the famous words, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will listen. God, we're in. We'll do whatever you want. By the way, what does it say in the book? Right? Which is really strange, to be honest with you. Right? How many of you can identify with the nation's response? Right? God comes with a long list of things which are going to be really inconvenient for your life. And God says, would you like this or not? Can you relate to the fact that the nation said, no, we don't want it? Sure, right? Sure. I mean, people offer you things all the time that you're not interested in, right? It's just going to be a burden. So you say, I don't need that. And the question is, and the issue here is that in order to accept God, God is essentially saying, I'm a package deal. I come with this whole big book, right? With all of these instructions. And that's the package deal that is very uncomfortable and that we're disturbed by. So the question is, what motivated the Jewish people to say, we want it? That's really the question. The response of the other nations is very understandable. What's not understandable is the response of the Jewish people. Why did they say that we want it? And for that, we want to go to another question. And that is on page 36, what would motivate you to take on a demanding and inconvenient responsibility or task? Anyone here do anything today that was difficult? I mean, something that you wouldn't choose to do on your own, just like wake up on a Sunday, hey, I would love to do this, right? Anyone do that? Maybe it was just going to work, right? For starters, right? And maybe it was whatever tasks you had to do, which you didn't love doing. Maybe you went to get an oil change. That wasn't quite what you were looking to do, but you just had to do it, so you did it. What motivates us to do things which are in fact inconvenient? Because we all do things which are very inconvenient. And we can all probably list a list of things that we just did today which were inconvenient. What motivates us to do things which are inconvenient? Okay, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the story behind inconvenient things that we do. Okay? And we're going to see that there are multiple stories that we create behind the inconvenient things that we do. We're going to start with the most common form of motivation. Most common form of motivation, we use this for children. We use this for ourselves. We use this for employees. Okay? We use this for spouses. Okay? And that is an extrinsic reward. What percentage of people are happy with the jobs that they have? I think that they say, you know the numbers? It's a statistic. I think like 10% of people are actually happy with the jobs that they have, which is why we live in such a happy world, right? So why do they go to work? Why do 9 out of 10, assuming that statistic is right, which I'm not 100% sure about, but why do 9 out of 10 people go to work every day? Because they're going to get a paycheck. They're getting compensation. They're going to get a reward. The reward has nothing to do intrinsically with their work. They just know they have to do this work so they can walk out with something that they need. Okay? One is not directly associated with the other. Okay? It's just that if I do this, I get that. And I need that, so I'm willing to do this. Okay? Another motivation, which we're going to refer to as an extrinsic motivation, meaning it is extrinsic that the reward and the effort are not inherently associated with each other. And that is fear or punishment. If you don't take a shower now, you are not going to be able to play with blah, 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 right? That can work. Right? An employee knows that if I don't produce X amount of whatever, I will lose my job. That works. Is there a direct association between my fear or my work and what's being produced? What I'm getting, what I want, the paycheck? No. I'm doing this so I can get that. Okay, so we use extrinsic, external motivation in order to get to something that we want. We all do this. There are things that we don't want to do, but we do it because if we do it, we get something else that we need or that we want. Everyone clear about that? So there's reward, and I'll just say simply punishment. Reward and punishment or fear. Okay. Let me ask you this question. How many people do you think, how many Americans, because we're a moral country, right? How many Americans would pay their taxes if the IRS was shut down today? If April 15th, how many people would pay their taxes? What percentage? It's the right thing to do. We need a country to run. Our money's needed to run the country, right? So we see that what motivates most people to pay their taxes, just from the laughing, everyone else was too scared to say anything, right? Just from the laughing, we know that fear gets people to do certain things. Okay. Let's go a little bit deeper. There are better motivations than reward and punishment, which are extrinsic, external to what it is that we're doing. There are things that the very act of doing them is a benefit to us. For example, when I restrict myself from eating certain things, I may feel better. So the very act itself is what the benefit is. It's not like I'm not eating this so I can get that. Not eating this is good for me. Right? When I brush my teeth, I am keeping my teeth healthy and avoiding getting cavities. So the very act is, in a certain respect, the reward. One isn't detached from the other. That would be what we can call an intrinsic reward or consequence. Because it's intrinsic, it's part of the very thing that I'm doing. It's not two separate things that I'm doing this to get that. This gives me what I'm getting. Clear? Okay. There's a deeper form of motivation that can be used in order for us to do things even though they may be uncomfortable. Right? So children, after you take them to the dentist for the first time and they need to have a cavity filled, right? That is a pretty good motivator for them to brush their teeth. It's not a guarantee, though. I have experience. So then we have relationship. Okay, relationship. Now, relationship is very interesting. I'm going to do something which is inconvenient or uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to do it for you, even though it remains inconvenient for me, and you're the beneficiary, I'm not the beneficiary. But what I get out of it is relationship. That's what I get out of it. I get relationship out of it. So it's not like when I'm brushing my teeth, so now I'm avoiding getting cavities, or when I'm avoiding eating this food, I feel better. Now I'm making you feel better. But that gives me a relationship. And relationship is powerful and deep, and all human beings need relationships. Which is why I think I said this in last week's class. Why? I may have said it somewhere else. Can't keep track anymore. But why, when people are put in solitary confinement, they deteriorate emotionally, intellectually. In many ways, they deteriorate very quickly because there is no human connections. Relationships are very valuable, and that's a great motivator, and it's somewhat of an intrinsic motivator as well. Because even though it's not the act that I'm benefiting from, but it is the bonding that is being created when I do something for you. And then we have the most powerful motivator. The most powerful motivator is when I do something because the thing is important. When I do something because it is the right thing to do. It's what we would call idealism. I believe that this is the right thing to do, and therefore I'm doing it. Not because I am going to get something else from it, not because it provides me with anything, but because it's the right thing to do. And I want you to know something. I'm going to tell you something about yourself, which I hope you know. You get very, very inspired whenever you hear a story about someone who does something because it's the right thing to do. Because it's the most inspiring thing to hear. That someone dedicated themselves to doing something, inconvenienced themselves, whether it was materially, financially, with their time, whatever it may be, because they wanted to do the right thing. So what we're seeing is that when there is something which is inconvenient, it's because, and we don't want to do it because there's no motivation for us to do it. The moment we have motivation to do something, suddenly we will readily do something which is inconvenient. Arguably, we may have spent most of our day doing something inconvenient. So we're very ready to do inconvenient things. The question is, what is the story around that inconvenience? If the story is, I get a paycheck, I'm probably going to do it because I need that paycheck. If the story is, it's something bad is going to happen to me, the police are going to come after me, I'm probably going to do it. If it's going to make me feel better, even deeper reason to do it. If it's going to build a relationship, powerful reason to do it. If I believe that this is what I should be doing because this makes the world better, is what I was put on earth for, whatever it may be, idealism, I'm deeply motivated to do it. And guess what? This is true regarding mitzvot, God's commandments. The question is what our story is around commandments. Our story may simply be, it's inconvenient, and I have no story. I have no story. They're just inconvenient. Get out of my way. Right? And if that's where we're at, of course, mitzvahs are a pain in the neck. Right? Of course they are. You have my full support. Right? And I will tell you, there are certain mitzvahs which are a pain in the neck for me because I don't have motivation around those mitzvahs. I have them around other ones, but not around those. And that's exactly the reason why they're a pain in the neck. You may have heard of Viktor Frankl, right? Great psychotherapist, Holocaust survivor. And in his great work Toward a Meaningful Life, which everyone should read if you've never read, you should go onto Amazon tonight after class and buy the book. It's a phenomenal book. And he writes over there, those who have a why to live can bear almost anyhow. And he proves this from the Holocaust and what he saw in the Holocaust. If you have a why to live for, then the how question is a very small question. Inconvenience, we'll figure it out. We just need to have a strong why. Now, I want to be very clear that the story, when I say a story around mitzvot, I'm not talking about making up a story to motivate ourselves. I'm now going to take you through different levels of stories that the Torah tells us about mitzvot so we can actually understand and appreciate the significance so that we have motivation, much greater motivation than we may have had until now. So we have extrinsic reward, we spoke about a paycheck, extrinsic negative consequence, fear of poverty, let's say, intrinsic reward and consequence like keeping healthy. Then we have a relationship like love and importance of the task in making a difference. These are all the different levels. And if you are righteous, what do you give God? Does God need what we do? If our mitzvah don't benefit God, they are an unpleasant burden. However, the way we solve this blockage of the burden of mitzvos is by changing the emotion around our intellectual understanding. When we feel differently about what we understand, or I should say when we understand differently, then we feel differently. And once we feel differently, we have a different story about what we're doing and we're motivated to do it. Following me? That makes sense? When we have a different story or understanding about something, we feel differently about it. And when we feel differently about it, we're motivated to do it. Right? You remember my question last week? How did she marry a guy like that? Right? The answer to that question is get to know the guy. And suddenly your story about this guy changes, and now you understand why she loves him. That's what we're saying about mitzvah. Okay, but we don't want to make up stories. Okay, that's just playing with our minds. We want to know the true story around mitzvot. And here we're going to see something really fascinating. What we're going to see is that actually in Jewish study, there are a number of explanations given. And each one gives us a different level of perspective. So we go deeper and deeper and deeper. The first level, I hear some motivation. It's extrinsic. It's not so inspiring, but it can get me to maybe shake a leg, right? We go deeper and we have a deeper story, a deeper, more moving understanding of what the significance of mitzvot. And then that drives me much more strongly. The deeper we go, the stronger the motivation is. And that's why we need to go deep. Because otherwise, we are in tremendous conflict with God, who put us on this world and gave us instructions. And I don't believe that anyone leaves that conflict freely. I think sometimes we try to, we don't like to feel guilty, but at the end of the day, a truth weighs on us. So our best option is to discover deeper motivation instead of seeing the mitzvah and not understanding why they would have any significance. So here's the basic motivation. And you'll find this many times in the Torah, so it's a very obvious motivation. And that is reward and punishment, just like we spoke before. Reward and punishment. God says if you follow the mitzvot, you're going to get an abundance of crop, and the rain's going to fall, and you're going to have wine and oil and all the things that the Torah speaks about. And if you don't follow the commandments, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, which we don't even want to mention, right? Reward and punishment. And in fact, reward and punishment is one of the 13 fundamental beliefs of Judaism, that we get rewarded and punished for the things that we do. Okay, let me ask you this question. How many of you are thrilled about the fact that God gave us commandments and we get rewarded and punished for doing or not doing them? Following. How many of you are excited about that? Wow. Not a single hand. Amazing. So you're not really excited about this level of motivation. Because, yeah, we can get reward, but then there's also the punishment. And come on, God, let's have a real relationship. Reward and punishment. It's interesting. Not a single hand went up, right? So, and not only that, but our reward and punishment is not limited to this world. The reward and punishment actually carries over to the next world, the world that the soul goes to after it leaves the body. So there's an entire school of thought that builds the entire Judaism on this principle. I'm not going to say any more about it because I want to take you deeper, because I'm not satisfied with this at all either. Okay, so I definitely want to take you deeper than this. But you see the parallel between the first motivation, extrinsic motivation I spoke about earlier of reward and punishment, and this extrinsic motivation. So God says, do this, and I'm going to reward you, right? Don't wear wool and linen. You know, there's a commandment in the Torah, they're not allowed to wear a garment that has wool and linen together, sewn together, okay? Don't wear wool and linen, and God says, I'm going to reward you. Association, what's the connection between the action and the reward? It's like the paycheck. I go to work, I'm miserable all day, but at least I get a paycheck at the end of the week. All right, God, I'm not going to wear wool and linen, but at least I get a reward. Right? Or I don't want to get punished. It's very similar to, or almost identical to, the extrinsic motivation. Let's go to the question on page 40. In your estimation, is the prospect of reward and punishment a sufficient and satisfactory motivation to follow God's instructions? How many of you think this is sufficient motivation to follow God's instructions? How many of you think it's not sufficient? Raise your hand. Okay. So at the end of the day, I looked at what I did and said, what I did was really meaningless. It has no value. What has value is that I get a check in the mail. But the action itself, it leaves me in a relationship with the action itself as a valueless action. And we're going to watch a video now, which is going to demonstrate to us very simply something that we all know, and that is that if you ask someone to do something meaningless, even if they're going to get rewarded for it, it is really like torturing a person. And most people will end up quitting a job that's absolutely meaningless. Here we go. Let's watch this.
Clouds of dust rose behind the wheels of a wealthy baron's horse-drawn carriage. "Halt!" he cried to his coachman, as a field of golden, shoulder-high wheat came into view. In the field, a muscular young man grasped a long scythe with both hands. Again and again, the farmhand brought the metal tool down in a sweeping motion, deftly harvesting the waving wall of grain. The baron was mesmerized. "What graceful movements!" he exclaimed. "How calming to watch!" The Baron approached the farmhand. "I'll double your pay if you come to work for me," he offered. The young man wiped his forehead. "All right," he replied at last. 4 ruble a day." "Done," clapped the Baron, and he opened his carriage door for the farmhand to hop aboard. Minutes later, they arrived at an enormous mansion. The Baron ushered his new employee into a lavishly furnished lounge. Sinking into a cushioned recliner, the Baron ordered the young man to get to work with his scythe. "But where's the wheat?" he gasped in astonishment. "It's not about the wheat," replied the Baron. "It's about the movements. Imagine that you are standing in a field filled with tall grain. Swing your scythe as gracefully as you did in the field." With a bewildered shrug, the farmhand got to work. He raised and lowered his scythe with a rhythm that enchanted his new boss. It was far easier than harvesting real wheat, but after half an hour, the young man set down his tool. "Don't stop!" cried the Baron. "You have wonderful rhythm. I'll triple your pay if need be." Again, the worker silently attacked the stalks of imaginary grain. On and on he swung that scythe, but after an hour, he let it drop with a jarring clang. "I'm going back to my old job," he cried in exasperation. "But why?" asked the Baron in amazement. "This work is far easier, and your pay is far greater." "I'd rather work a whole lot harder," snapped the farmhand, "and get pennies in return, as long as I can do something productive. Work that accomplishes nothing is sheer torture." And off he went, leaving the Baron shaking his head in wonder. This parable was offered by Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. It is human nature to seek meaning in our activities, for without meaning, even if there be ample reward, even light work becomes unbearably burdensome and disheartening. Reward is simply not a valid exchange for genuine accomplishment.
A fascinating thing, I think it was Encyclopedia Encarta, or there was an online encyclopedia that was being put together by Microsoft in like 1998. They hired a crazy amount of people to do the work to collect all the information. And along comes Wikipedia, right? They didn't pay a penny. People are giving information for free. And they build up an encyclopedia far faster and much, much larger than what Microsoft was able to put together, shutting down Microsoft's project. Microsoft was spending millions and millions of dollars. Motivation, Wikipedia was spending $0. Wikipedia's motivation was meaningful work. People felt that they were doing something meaningful. If we just pay people, reward and punishment is extrinsic, leaves people feeling empty, and ultimately the check in the mail will not motivate people to do that thing. So number one is, with this explanation, does God need us? No. God just threw some meaningless tasks at us, and what we're doing is meaningless. We're just a bunch of puppets doing it to grab a reward, which at the end of the day doesn't really work well. That's level number one, extrinsic reward. Next level is intrinsic reward. Intrinsic reward, we said, is like brushing your teeth, where the actual action is of benefit to you. And this is what Rambam and Ramban, Maimonides and Nachmanides, both write about as well. Let's read text 5a.
Each of the 613 commandments either convey an admirable idea or rejects a repugnant idea. Either is a principle of justice or wards off, as injustice either endows a noble character trait or cautions against a negative trait.
What Maimonides is saying is this, that every single commandment in the Torah is cultivating people to be better people. We may or may not realize it, because sometimes it is subtle or it's the undercurrent of the commandment. But by doing certain actions, We actually cultivate ourselves with certain values. By way of example, if you tell your child, they take all the cutlery out of the dishwasher and they dump it into the drawer. So you say, no, you can't do it that way. The forks have to go here, the spoons have to go here, the knives have to go there. What are you teaching the child? How to put away the cutlery the way you want. But you're really teaching them an undercurrent, and that is things have a place, and therefore you have to respect the place of where things belong. Okay? It's a simple thing, but the instruction you give them, without even explaining that, develops in the child an understanding, an unspoken understanding, maybe an unconscious understanding that things have a place. You teach a child, which happens to be a commandment of the Torah too, don't sit down in front of someone who is older than you. If there's someone older than you who's standing, they get the seat. You stand up and give them the seat, which I don't think is so common nowadays, unfortunately. What are we teaching our children? The fact that someone is older already gives them value over us. Check in the box if there's a 9-volt battery. Okay. I think my microphone is getting a little weak here. Do you understand what I'm saying? So we give our children instructions, and that actually molds character, even though we're not telling them the character that we're teaching them. Every single mitzvah in the Torah cultivates character, cultivates values. We may or may not know what those values are, but they are being cultivated. Who's the beneficiary? Who's the beneficiary? If you're doing actions that are cultivating and developing your character, who's the beneficiary? We are. I'm the beneficiary. It's like brushing my teeth. Brushing my teeth, who's the beneficiary? I'm the beneficiary. When I do a mitzvah, it develops my character. It produces a more refined individual. I am the beneficiary. Now you may be saying, well, that's not how you cultivate character. You give someone lectures and you explain ideals and values. But the truth is that modern day studies have actually demonstrated what the Torah teaches us, and that is when someone behaves a certain way repeatedly, it actually cultivates character within the person. So in text number 6, it explains, we're not going to read it, but just explains what many of you may know. I don't have a pen here, and I won't use someone else's, but if you bite on a pencil, it's okay, thank you, Stella. If you bite on I don't want to bite on your pen, but if you bite on a pen or a pencil, what are you doing? Smiling. And they demonstrate that if you ask people questions after they bite on their pencil and use the muscles of a smile, they will have a more optimistic response than if they stick a pencil in their mouth and they hold it like this, which is more of a frown. Right? Because action, when our body does things, it actually moves us in a certain direction. So the best thing to do is not focus so much on the philosophy, get the person to act. How do you get someone out of depression? I'm not talking about clinical serious depression, but someone who's really down. Move. Do something to help another person. Get out of yourself. The action, start philosophizing. Why are you upset? You shouldn't be upset. It's not a reason to be upset. We know how well that works, right? You get a person to move and do something, that is the best way to get someone out of a state of depression. So what do we have? A deeper story of mitzvah. That God gave us mitzvah because it actually cultivates us. So it's not just some extrinsic reward, it's really good for me. That's motivation. I like that. There's one thing these two have in common, and we're going to find out the next one also has in common. You know what they both have in common? God is giving us something. Who's the beneficiary in both cases? We are. Nothing to do with God, really. So we're still pretty meaningless to God. God's just nice, who's giving us actions to do which are to our benefit. And what's most disturbing is it's all about me. It's all about me. Let's go to figure 2.3 on page 44. We just discussed intrinsic reward and consequence, which is character development. There's an intrinsic benefit or lack thereof when we follow God's commandments, is that our character is developed. right? There are many mitzvot, we don't know what the character development is, but we trust after doing enough mitzvot and seeing enough to know, we begin to trust, right? For example, if you develop trust with someone, they ask you to do many different things, which are all sensible, and one day they ask you to do something which you don't really get. If you trust the person, you'll do it even though you don't get it. You're not going to need to know the reason every single time you trust the person. We have many mitzvot that develop our character, many that we don't understand how they develop our character, but with a little bit of trust, we can adopt them because we know they're for our benefit. But where does this leave us? The problem with this motivation is, if our mitzvot are not significant to God, are we significant to Him? We still have the question, this is very nice, God, that you gave me something that helps me, but does this have any significance to you? This is all about me. Does this have any significance to you? And if it doesn't have any significance to you, then is it really so important for me to do it, other than if I want to pursue self-help and self-development? And the next level of understanding is a relationship. And that is, when we do a mitzvah, we are creating a relationship with God. Let's read what King David writes about how important it is to him. I would say this, actually, before we read about King David, what King David says, I would say that the reason why every single one of us is in this room now, in some part, if not consciously, subconsciously, is because we want to have a stronger relationship with God. Because I cannot understand why in the world anyone would spend an hour and a half of their time on a Monday night after the first day of the week sitting in this room, right? Unless there's something motivating them. And I think that the deeper part of it is, there are many reasons why we're here, I'm sure, but the deeper part of it is because we want to have a deeper connection with God. Our soul yearns for that relationship. And it's the most challenging relationship in our life. You think your relationships are challenging? Right? Our relationship with God is really challenging. Like, hello, would you show up at least? Right? You ever stood up for a date? I hope not. But hello, God. Right? So let's read text number 7.
As the deer longs for streams of water, so do I long for you, O God. I thirst for God, the living God. When will I come and appear in God's presence?
What is King David expressing? His desire to have a deep, meaningful relationship with God. And that desire is, in some way, expresses itself through us at different times in our life. Here's a very heartwarming story that will bring out how God's commandments give God and us the ability to have a relationship. And now we're going to see how God is actually getting something out of the commandments He's giving us. Let's read text number 8. Beautiful story.
13-year-old golfer Ethan Couch wished in a hospital 2 years ago to go to the Masters. After his parents noticed that Couch was suffering from strange symptoms, tests revealed that he had tactile glioma and there was a benign but inoperable tumor in his brain. On Wednesday, Couch's wish will come true. Kevin Streelman, whose daughter spent time in intensive care after being born, decided that he wanted to make a difference in the child's life and give them a trip to Augusta National. After contacting the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Streelman was put in touch with Couch, who will serve as his caddy at the Masters Par 3 contest. Via ESPN, Streelman introduced himself to Ethan and explained that as a Masters competitor, he was allowed to choose his caddy for Wednesday's event. He was choosing Ethan. The boy fell silent. His parents, each listening over speakerphone, began crying. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was shaking. "I just wanted to go to the Masters," he'd later say. "I didn't expect this."
Okay, beautiful story. But I want to tell you something. I am offended by this guy Streelman. He has real chutzpah. Unbelievable chutzpah. This kid is sick. He wants to go to the Masters. And instead of Streelman just inviting him to come to the Masters, he says, but you can only come if you're going to be my caddy. Like, you have to work for it. Can't you just give the kid a free ticket? Why does he have to make him be his caddy? I mean, it's so nasty. How many of you agree with me? A couple. I don't agree with myself. Streelman was doing this boy the biggest favor. He insisted that you not just show up, you're going to have to be my caddy. I need you to be my caddy. Streelman needed the kid to be his caddy? No. But he chose to need him to be his caddy so that he can give the kid an extra opportunity beyond just showing up and actually being a hero during the day of being the caddy of one of the players. That's why he asks the boy, he tells the boy, I need you to be my caddy. God, every relationship, remember this by the way, remember this for your relationships. Okay? If you don't take this to God, at least for your relationships, remember this. Relationships only work if we make ourselves vulnerable. If I don't need anything from you, I will never have a relationship with you. If you don't need anything from me, you will never have a relationship from me. If I'm Mr. Macho and I tell my wife, I don't need anything, I'm here to provide you. Right? I don't need anything from you. All right? Whenever I need something, no, don't help me. That shuts down the relationship. A relationship means vulnerability on both sides. God says, my intrinsic self that we learned about last week, my infinite essential self, doesn't need anything because an infinite being can't need anything. But I am going to make myself need you. Just like a parent tells a child, I need you to do whatever, because the parent wants the child to do that for them, to forge that bond. Right? When someone gives me a gift that I don't really need, right? But I accept it. I don't say, I don't need it, I have it already. But no, I permit myself to be vulnerable and say, I love receiving gifts, and I'm so grateful that you're giving this to me. Right? When I need help, instead of shutting down the help, I take the help. That's a real man, by the way. A real man takes help. It's much harder to take help than to give help. And that's because we're being vulnerable. So God says, I don't inherently in my essential being need anything, but I am going to make myself need so that we can have a relationship. I in my creation can have a relationship. That's exactly what God is doing. And therefore God says, I'm going to command you. Just like the Streelman tells his boy, I need you to be my caddy. God says, I need you to do this. And when God makes this need, he really needs it. He made the need, but now he needs it. And when we do it, what we're doing is we are connecting very powerfully. And that's the reason why, as you may know, a mitzvah, the word mitzvah, commandment, the reward of a mitzvah, here we go again, is the word mitzvah means savta, which means the bonding, because the reward of bonding is the mitzvah of, is the experience of bonding. When we do a mitzvah, the greatest reward we get is that we are connecting with God. I always use the example, take your hero, okay? We'll use, all right, I'm not sure if we can say this after yesterday's game, but we'll say Wentz is sitting on the sidelines, right? Well, the defense is on the field, and he sees a kid with a bottle of Gatorade right behind him. And he says, oh my gosh, I'm so thirsty. Will you mind sharing some of your Gatorade with me? The kid's giving away his Gatorade. How's he going to feel? Like $1 million, right? Wentz asked me for a Gatorade. Right? He's going to go back to school the next day. Unbelievable. He doesn't even know they lost the game. Because when someone important asks us for something, it automatically makes a connection. He doesn't need the Gatorade. They got the big bucket, whatever they have over there, those barrels of Gatorade. Right? But he creates the need because he knows he'll excite the kid, and he forges a connection. And God gives us 613 commandments, not one. You know why? This is the real story. You think he wants to burden you? God's bored? Because God wants to give us as many opportunities as possible to connect with him. And he happens to know that some of them just aren't going to work very easily for us. So he gave us a whole lot of them. So you get to choose. All right, you weren't able to pull that one off, pull this one off. And we have many ways to connect with God. And if we were deeply spiritual people, if I was a deeply spiritual person, in a very deep way, and I would contemplate and meditate, I would be in a state of tremendous joy every time I do a mitzvah. The same way that kid was in tremendous joy when he gives over the Gatorade. It's the exact same story, except that it's not Wentz, with all due respect to Wentz, right, who just has a good arm for a few years. It's the infinite being, the source of everything. That's the real story behind mitzvah. We're creating a powerful and profound relationship every single time we do a mitzvah. So the more opportunities we have for connection, the better off we are. We're not resenting the fact that there are so many mitzvot. We're actually embracing it. And a true relationship, are you only married between 6 and 8 p.m.? I'm just asking. I'm sorry. I'm giving some people ideas here. Didn't mean that. Sorry. You understand what I'm saying? It's when we're in a relationship, you're in a relationship. It's 24 hours a day. It's all the time, right? And that's why we're in a relationship with God all the time. And that's why God gives us opportunities to connect with Him when we're eating, when we're sleeping, when we're talking, when we're playing, when we're doing anything. God gives us ways to connect with Him at all times because relationships are constant. Let's read text number 10.
The Talmud teaches that one who does a single mitzvah and refrains from sin merits the world to come. If so, why did God give us 613 mitzvot? Would it not have been sufficient for Him to admonish us against injustice? Thus, Rabbi Hananiah ben Akashia taught, God wished to make Israel meritorious. He therefore gave them an abundance of Torah mitzvot. God gave us the Torah and mitzvot in abundant measure to increase our merit. Also, the abundance of commandments guarantees that we will always have the opportunity to fulfill a mitzvah. This would not have been so if we had a few mitzvot.
Excellent. High five, Mark. All right. So figure 2.4, right? What do we see? Well, let's just look up here for a second. So the 630 mitzvahs give us more opportunity for connection, connect within any sphere of our lives, and other options if one struggles. If we're weak in this area of mitzvah, we can focus on this area of mitzvah. So suddenly, you see the story changes everything. 613 is no longer an ugly number. It's a beautiful number. God, why didn't you give us more? All right, we'll stop at 613. Jenny's getting nervous. It could have been more. It could have been, sure, it could have been. But there are reasons why it's exactly 613. Yeah. After all, we're human and we have limitations, right? So let's go to figure 2.4. Before, in our old story, a mitzvah equals a commandment. Oh, another commandment. Here we go. After our new story, mitzvah means connection. Whole different story. Before, I have to do a mitzvah. After, I get to do a mitzvah. Before, I need to do a mitzvah so that God will love me. After, God loves me, so He gave me a mitzvah. See, the whole story changes. This is the same thing in our relationships, right? First year of marriage, right? Hopefully it continued, but I know we're pretty guaranteed during the first year. All right, 6 months. So during the first 6 months, right? So your spouse asks you to do something, it's a pain in the neck, but you're happy to do it, sure. Why are you happy to do it? Because the story of your marriage is a happy story. I'm not sure what happens after 6 months, but the story changes. That's why our feeling changes. That's really what's changing. It's the story that's changing. It's the intellectual part that's changing, which changes the emotional part, which then changes our behavior. That's what's going on. And it's the same thing with the commandments. When we look at the commandments a certain way, we can look at it as a pain in the neck. God's ordering me to do things, or God's giving me the opportunity to connect with His infinite presence. It's unbelievable. Let's go to figure 2.5. So we have the extrinsic reward is earthly and heavenly reward. Extrinsic negative consequences are earthly and heavenly punishment. Intrinsic reward and consequences, character development. None of those give us any meaning in the actual action. Relationship is a connection with God. The actual action connects God to me and me to God. That's meaningful to God, that's meaningful to me. Let's go to the question, though. In your estimation, is the prospect of connection with God a sufficient and satisfactory motivation to follow God's instructions? Why and why not? Is this significantly motivating to anyone? I guess not. Does it mean anything to you to connect with God? Do you think that's significant that a finite human being has a way to connect with the infinite source of all? Is that meaningful? Is anyone here? Of course it is. It's deeply meaningful. Now, we may not be so in touch with that. We may still enjoy our bottle of beer and hot dog while we're watching the game, or whatever you do when you're watching the game, right? Or whatever else suits our fancy. But we can at least understand intellectually that there's something very valuable about that. So it's not about our actions are significant on their own, not because of an extrinsic or even intrinsic benefit of gain. There's something that happens. There's something that happens when I have a relationship and I connect with God. And what I'm gaining is my relationship with God. Okay? Who's benefiting from this? Who else is benefiting from this? God. God says, I'm creating a need for myself. Can you please fulfill that need for me? I'm vulnerable. Because God wants to be in a relationship. He says, I need you to do something for me. We do it for God. God's need is fulfilled. So God gains and we gain. We both gain, right? God says, I need you to do this. Just like the golfer says, I need you to be my caddy. He creates a need. He makes himself vulnerable, which means needy. He makes himself vulnerable. So when we fulfill his need, we are providing God with his need. So God's need is being fulfilled, and our relationship is being fulfilled. So we are both benefiting from this, which is what we call in English a win-win situation. Before God created, what was there? Only God. There was nothing other than an infinite entity or being that was all pervasive, because it's infinite. So it's everything, nothing, and everything all at once. Okay? There was nothing else. Then God begins to create. Okay? And when God creates, God creates an endless number of things. Right? God creates essentially out of unity, singularity. God creates plurality. Every human being is different. There are billions and trillions and gazillion number of blades of grass, right? I'm not sure if it's true that every snowflake is different or not, but it sounds good. We'll go with it, right? I mean, there's just an endless number if we think about it. If we just break things down to their molecular level, right? I mean, how many molecules are there in the universe, right? It's mind-boggling, right? Beyond what we can even fathom. The pluralism is enormous. So from singularity, God suddenly creates this enormous amount of plurality. And even in our own lives, our lives are filled with so many different, our lives are so fragmented. How many things did every single one of us do today? We have material aspirations, we have career aspirations, we have family, we have work, we have friends, we have hobbies, classes, right? All these different things that are part of our lives. Our lives are made up of so many different things. And when God created the world with a purpose. And the purpose is that we partner with God in demonstrating that in a reality where God is not inherently seen, we discover on our own that everything is really a unified oneness. that everything is really connected with God. Okay, it's a deep concept. But then again, the purpose of the universe is not going to be a shallow concept, I hope. It's a deep concept. But it's the concept that we, and this is our mission, by the way, on the world. This is our mission. The Jewish people were put here to be a light unto the nations. That doesn't mean that you buy strong flashlights and shine it around. A light unto the nations means that we reveal in every single way we possibly can, in everything we do in our life, that there is a creator. That means in our actions, in our ideas, in the way we behave, we reflect the idea that we believe that there is a creator to the universe. We're not living in randomness and in chaos. And when we do that, we are creating a common undercurrent of everything, of all the pluralism in our life, which is that it's all connected to one theme, that there is a creator. And we bring the world back to a oneness within the plurality. See, a oneness without any plurality is no accomplishment. But God says, I want to create a world where there's so many different things. And in that confusion, in that pluralism, I want you to create unity. You see, it's not an accomplishment. Someone can't say that I have peace in my home because I live alone. Right? You can't have peace means that there is a positive and a negative, or a male and a female. I'm not going to say which one's the positive and the negative. I'll leave that up to you to find out, right? But you have a positive and a negative, and the positive and negative get along. They learn how to work together. That is peace. If you have one person, there's no peace to work out. That's not peace. Sorry. You got to get married, live together, create unity. That's peace. God says, I'm going to create pluralism. There's going to be 1,000. You're going to put 2 Jews in the room and have 8 opinions, and then we're going to reveal the oneness of it all. Let's read text number 11.
When we perform a mitzvah, we infuse this physical world with the infinite light of the divine. This is our entire purpose and the reason we were created, to transform the darkness of this lowly world into light, that God's glory should fill the entire physical world.
Okay. Think of it as a puzzle. I'm going to just give me a few minutes. I may have to take it after the class, okay? Think of this as a puzzle. Think of a puzzle. You ever put a puzzle together? When you put all of the pieces together, suddenly you see that they look like individual pieces, but they are really all part of one entity, one picture. That is what we are doing. A mitzvah is like a copper wire that conducts divine energy, and the divine energy comes right into whatever it is that we are associating and connecting with God, and we are revealing the presence of God. This is the reason why some Christians, when they see me walking around with the yarmulke, they thank me for testifying. It took me a few minutes to understand the first time someone told me that, what they were talking about. I said, I wasn't in a court today. I'm not testifying about anything. I'm fine. Right? What they're saying is, when they see a yarmulke, they're saying, you are testifying that there is a God. That's what they're saying. And they're thanking me for it. No Jew ever thanked me for testifying. For some reason. I'm waiting for the day, though. The Jew says, why do you have to make us look so strange? Why can't you be normal? That's what the Jew tells me. And I say, I love you too. It's just wonderful to be around Jews. Okay, so anyway. This is the deepest, we all heard of the phrase tikkun olam, right? Which means to fix the world. That's literally what the words mean, right? And generally when people speak about tikkun olam, they talk about, some of you heard me say this, picking up the litter on the side of the highways, which is a beautiful thing to do, right? You're fixing the world. You're making it a cleaner place. That's a very, very base, shallow understanding of what tikkun olam means, and that's not really what the words were intended to mean. The words were intended to mean fixing the world by revealing to the world that it has a deeper source and it's not an independent entity, but it's entirely dependent on God. And this is the reason why we are here. So when God gives us things to do, which demonstrate that there is a creator to the universe, I'm living in idealism. That we're doing this because we believe that we need to reveal to the universe that there is a creator and not buy into the facade of our great, unbelievable, immortal independence, which is a big lie. That's what we're doing. And now it's not for me. I'm not doing it because I'm benefiting from it. I'm not even doing it necessarily because it's going to give me a relationship with God, which it all does. I'm going to get reward. It's going to develop my character. I'm going to develop a relationship with God. But there's a deeper reason driving it, and that is idealism. Like I once had an incident where someone wanted something from me, and it was improper. We'll just leave it at that. So I said, I can't do that. It's just not moral. I can't do that for you. So the person bent down. It was a woman. She bent down to her pocketbook. And she said, if I were to write out a $500 check for you right now, you would have lunch with me at the non-kosher restaurant. Whoa, right? That was a moment. It was a great moment. These give me stories. I love them. But anyway, right? It was a moment. It was really a moment, right? But here's the point, though. Okay, and I hope you all know this. Got to be more than $500. No, I'm joking. Truly, there is nothing that anyone can give me that's going to buy me to going to a non-kosher restaurant. It's an idealism, right? I believe absolutely that by me eating certain foods and not eating others, I'm living by divine will and demonstrating, including to that woman, right? I'm demonstrating that I don't do whatever I want in this world because this world was created by a creator, and I'm living here with a purpose. And that's why I do the things I do. Now, I can't say I have that idealism with everything. In fact, I fail with a lot of things. So clearly I don't have the idealism, right? And that has a lot to do with my story around those mitzvot. But then again, thank God, God gave us 613. So there are others, I have this idealism. So we may have different levels of stories with different mitzvot. But the deeper we can get into the story of the reason why God gave us mitzvot, the more motivation we have and the more emotionally motivated we are to do the things that God put us here to do. I want to conclude with just one very important point. And it's really a point that I just made. If someone's on a diet, you're on a diet, so you're doing great for 3 days, right? You're not eating anything off the diet. And then comes the 4th day, you know what happens, right? So boom, right? You have that chocolate mousse. You're just going to control yourself, right? What should you tell yourself after you have that chocolate mousse? What should you tell yourself? Forget it. I broke the diet. It's over with. I can't keep to it. It's over. Or you say, look, I messed up. I had the chocolate, but that doesn't take away the 3 good days. And I can jump back on the diet tomorrow morning. Is that true? Of course it's true, right? And this is true with anything that we're dedicating ourselves to. Having an all or nothing approach is a very unhealthy way to approach something, right? Imagine someone is stingy, right? Whenever they pass someone who's truly in need, they just can't take out a quarter or $1 and help them. But one day they do, and they feel like a big hero, they do, right? Does all the times they didn't help the beggar discount the time that they did? No, this beggar can now buy lunch, right? Every single victory is a victory. Every single time we do a godly act, it's a godly act. If I go into the supermarket, okay, listen to this. If I go into the supermarket and I'm buying ketchup for dinner tonight, the organic, no sugar, horrible ketchup, right? So you're buying that ketchup, right? Because you're going to be good, right? And there are 2 bottles. There's one that has a Circle U certifying that it's kosher and one that doesn't. So we easily, honestly, it makes a lot of sense to me, right? To honestly say, does it really make a difference if I'm going to buy the kosher one or the non-kosher one? The rest of my meal is not kosher. But you know what? It does make a difference. Because I'm doing an act in alliance with divine will. Which means I am stating in my little place in the world that there's a God. That's what I'm doing. Think about that next time you're buying ketchup. Right? It's that simple. It's not that hard. Right? It's not that hard at all. So we should never adopt an all or nothing attitude. We should realize that none of us will ever be perfect. You have my guarantee, money back, the Mega Millions jackpot guarantee. I will give you that amount of money if you ever become perfect. We're all a work in progress, and the question is only which direction we're going. And if we go in the direction of doing more things to state to the universe and to ourselves that there is a God, then what we're doing is we're making this world a more godly place, and that is the truly deepest story around every mitzvah. And so I just want to conclude, okay? I just want to conclude. So earn a reward. That's the base story around mitzvot, that we earn rewards, which is true. That's a motivator, but it's extrinsic and not very deeply motivating. It refines our character. We get benefit from it, but we still don't understand the inherent value in a mitzvah. I mean, it serves me well, but what's the reason for doing these acts? Then it creates a relationship. God has a need that he created, and I'm fulfilling God's need, and thereby I'm connecting with God. Very powerful. But lastly, it brings God's vision closer to reality. That is extremely, extremely powerful.